Compromise where you can. Where you can't, don't. Even if everyone is telling you that something wrong is something right. Even if the whole world is telling you to move. It is your duty to plant yourself like a tree, look them in the eye and say no. You move.
Never step onto the battlefield of ideas unprepared. Before you enter the fray, you need a plan. And there's no better place to get one than right here on Tactics with host Caleb Colquitt. The Situation Room goes live now on News Radio 1440.
Welcome in, everybody. Thanks so much for being with us. Wow, Kevin Elkins is freaking deaf because that is on like 11. I didn't even know that our speakers went that loud. I almost blew out my eardrums coming back with that. Wow. All right then. But thank you so much for being with us. We appreciate it. Welcome in on this Thursday, whether you're watching us on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, Periscope, any way that you're watching us, we certainly appreciate it. Or if you're listening to us on the weekend replay on News Radio 1440, we're certainly glad that you've chosen to make us a part of your day. And as always, it is Thursday, and you know what that means. We have our special guest on every Thursday from Eagle Forum, Alabama. Welcome back to the program, Becky Gerritson.
Hey, thanks for having me on. It was an exciting day today.
Boy, it was. And I got to say, there were weeks where, you know, that we even decided that it was probably better to not even do a segment because there wasn't much going on in the way of state news. That is not the case this week, that's for sure.
No, it was crazy. And about 45 minutes ago, actually less than an hour ago, the lottery did pass the Senate today and is headed now to the House.
Okay.
So you want to start with that one?
Yeah, I tell you what, since it's breaking news, I was actually going to do something else first, but since that's what just happened, we'll go ahead and run with that. So, yeah, what was the vote on it? Did it pass by a wide margin? And what was sort of the general feel of the Senate and the reason that they passed that?
Let me just give you a quick breakdown. This is called SB 220, and it was by Senator Albritton and Senator Marsh. It is a constitutional amendment. So eventually it will go, if it passes the House, since it's already passed the Senate, it will go to a vote of the people in March of 2020. But this was the bill that was a paper lottery only, supposed to be a clean bill, very simple. Well, they added some amendments to it. So here's what we have now. Not only is it a paper lottery, but it includes electric Powerball tickets, and it allows for all those games that were in operation before 2005, like Victoryland, Green Track, those will all be reinstated.
So this isn't just, so calling it a lottery bill really isn't even fair. It's more like a more comprehensive gambling bill.
Well, and it was supposed to be a lottery bill.
Right,
so
when it originally started.
Yes. Now there were other amendments. They wanted to include fantasy football and those fantasy contest kind of games. That was declined. I mean, most every other amendment was declined. Actually, an amendment was added on to change the distribution of the money. So in this bill, it originally called for, they're thinking, their estimation, that after they pay for all the winnings and, all the payouts and all the advertising, that they will net around $170 million. And in this bill, that was going to go to the general fund. Now, The other bill that was out there was going to be split 50-50 with the Alabama Trust Fund and the Alabama Education Fund. Mm-hmm. But this is actually going to, the first part of these payments, they're going to repay the Alabama Trust Fund. That's from transfers that were made back in 2013 and 14 and 15. And once those get back in where they were supposed to be, then those remaining winnings are going to go to the general fund.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, just because so the audience can kind of sort through this. So what originally happened is a few years ago, we had a shortfall in education and we had to sort of take from the general fund in order to balance the books. And what this new one would do is, the way that the bill is written now, that the money that they bring in from the lottery or these other gambling things that would be made legal now, that money is going to go to essentially pay back the general fund. And once that imbalance is corrected, then it's going to be split 50-50. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah. Let me just kind of restate this. That money way back in 13, 14, and 50 was taken from the Alabama Trust Fund, which was kind of like our little bank account, our little savings account. And it was actually sent over to the general fund. We didn't rate it for education. We rated it for our general fund.
Okay.
So yeah, we're going to pay back into our savings account and get that back where it's supposed to be. And then what's going to happen after that's all paid back, half of the proceeds will go back to the Alabama Trust Fund just to keep kind of building that up. And then half will go to the general fund. So let me just put this in perspective. We're talking about $170 million. When, let's say a couple years where Alabama Trust Fund's completely paid back off, and now we're going to go into what this bill says, splitting it 50-50 into the trust fund and then 50% into the Alabama general fund. We're talking about less than 2%, probably closer to 1% of our total budget is going to get some money from this gambling. I mean, this is such an insignificant amount of money. But what it brings to our state as far as social programs that are going to be implemented and foreclosures that are going to happen and all the things that come along with gambling, this is really not going to be helpful to our state.
So essentially what you're stating is that even though we are going to get, and granted it's not much, it's basically the loose change you find in the couch, we are going to get some money from this. But the problem is because of the things that, and we know this for a fact by studies done on other states that allow for gambling, with people that have gambling addictions, that kind of thing, that the money that we're going to be paying out in social programs, things like Medicaid or, welfare, that's going to wind up being a net loss. Is that what you're suggesting?
Well, it could be a net loss, but it's going to reduce those gains greatly. And we know that from other states, which is, one of the main reasons we're against this. It's a horrible way to fund government. It's such an insignificant amount of money, but it brings in so many more costs. But our biggest Eagle Forum's number one is because this preys on the poor. The poor believe that the only way they can get rich is if they win the lottery. So what the companies do who run these lotteries is they go ahead and put all the billboards up in these areas, and they entice those who can least afford it. So, and this really is a tax. It's a tax not paid by the wealthy, because it's not the wealthy that are usually buying the lottery tickets, it's the poor.
Right.
So it's a big bummer to me. I'm very sad that it passed. It will go to the House. It will probably have an easier time going to the House. And if you want to copy from my Facebook page, I did post the roll call vote so you can see. But I'll tell you, in the Montgomery area, Will Barfoot, he voted yes. Clyde Chambliss, who is the senator for this area, voted yes.
Yeah, he's my senator.
Those are the two. Yeah, those are our two that were close by, and both of them voted yes. There were 21 yays and 12 nays. So it passed pretty easily. Well, now
I tell you what, Barfoot actually voted the opposite way on the bill that I'm about to mention, but Clyde Chambliss also voted in favor of the gas hike. So I'm not real thrilled with my senator right now.
Yeah.
And he's always been real conservative. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, I don't know. This was a crazy time. So I was on my way home from Birmingham. I did not get to go to the State House today, but I listened to it on my phone on the way down. And I will say one thing positively. The way this debate went, and it was about 2.5 hours that they debated on the floor and offered different amendments, it was not as contentious as a lot of these controversial fights normally are. I don't know what's happening down there, but there is a new mix of people that just seem to be more civil. And I'm not saying, that everything's all roses down there, but there's definitely a better feeling. I may have mentioned that last time. There's some new blood there, but it really seems that everyone was respectful, even with the disagreements. And I was happy to see that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a step in the right direction.
Let's not call people racist, and let's not get ugly. and no one did. It was very respectful on both sides. So I'm glad. I'm glad we're moving in that direction as far as, how things go on the floor.
Right.
So it is headed to the House now. It will go through a committee. They most likely won't have a hearing. I mean, I guess I shouldn't say. They could possibly have a public hearing about it.
Mm.
It will go through a committee. It will get voted on, and I'm sure it's going to get voted out of the committee, and then it will go to the House floor. All of this could happen. It could be in committee next Wednesday, and it could be on the floor as early as Thursday or possibly the following Tuesday. So this is all going to happen pretty quick.
Well, now, one thing that I don't know, I get the feeling, because a lottery bill has passed in the House and Senate before, but it's never passed a vote of the people. Maybe This is just me being pessimistic, which, I mean, does happen from time to time. I just get the feeling that if this winds up going to a vote of the people, that they're going to wind up passing it this time. And I don't know why that is. It's just a gut feeling. I've got nothing to go on, but I don't know. The sentiment seems different.
Yes, I feel the same way. It was 20 years ago, the last time it was a vote of the people, and it was voted down.
Right, Governor Siegelman.
There's going to be millions of dollars poured into advertising to just show how wonderful this is going to be for the state.
Mm-hmm.
And the culture has changed, and I feel like you. I'm very concerned. If this passes the House, I think it's going to pass this time in March of 22.
Now,
I hope I'm wrong. I really hope I'm wrong.
I don't know that.
It's going to take a lot of grassroots activists and conservative groups and church groups and stuff to come along and really fight back.
Have you heard anything about the governor? Do you think that there's at least a chance that Governor Ivey vetoes it?
No, I wouldn't think so. No.
Yeah.
No way.
I hate to say it, but I don't either. I thought maybe there was a chance, but no, I don't think that she's going to veto it either.
Well, and again, actually, I don't think it would matter because it's going to go to a vote of the people, and if the people voted for a constitutional amendment, it will happen whether she wants it to or not.
Yeah.
So.
Well,
okay.
That's where we
Moving
stand.
on.
Yeah. Sorry to bum everybody out by starting out with that story, but I tell you what, we'll bum you out a little more. The constitutional carry bill that I actually brought up on the show Friday, that wound up failing the Senate. So since we're keeping score here, new lottery bill passes the Senate. Constitutional carry bill can't even make it out of committee.
Yes. And, as you're talking, I don't know if you want to, I am just going to try to look up what that vote was. I was there in the committee hearing that day, and it was a packed house.
Mm.
It was on Wednesday, and it was Senator Allen's bill. And I know there were 2 Republicans on the committee that voted against it. I think Senator Sessions was one of them. We do have a Senator Sessions in the Alabama Senate.
Right, not Jeff Sessions, but another Senator Sessions.
Yeah. Anyway, as we're talking, I will see if I can find that. But it was very close, and my feeling is one of the senators I know had mentioned in the discussion during the committee meeting that something about the sheriff and that the sheriffs don't want this. And the reasoning is if you don't need to buy a permit anymore, then they're going to lose money at the sheriff's office. But what Senator Allen, who sponsored the bill, said all their research has shown that the states who've gone to constitutional carry, their permits have actually increased, which makes no sense. But it has happened.
Well, now,
so he was trying to. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say this was the argument that I actually made on Friday, but I took a little different stance in my prediction. What I said was because there is the reciprocity, in other words, even though I don't need my permit to carry in the state of Alabama, I know that if I go out of state, I need my permit for states like Tennessee, where I need to have some kind of permit from a state, and as long as Tennessee or whatever state that I'm in happens to have reciprocity like all of our neighboring states do, then I'm going to go ahead and get my permit whether I need it in the state of Alabama or not. And so what I predicted was right. And so what I predicted was they're probably going to see a little dip in the amount of permits they get, but probably not much. I didn't know that in other states where they had gone constitutional carry, which I think are 14 now, that they'd actually seen an increase in pistol permits.
Yeah. And I'm so glad you said that. I'm sorry to interrupt you there.
No, go ahead.
I got so excited because you were right. That was the reason why, is that now people are feeling more confident that they can, carry more easily, and they do want to take it to other states, and so they get it. Anyway, I have been told, or there have been rumors around, that this may come back up, probably not in this form, but this may not be the end of this issue before the session is over. We have until the end of May, beginning of June is when it's going to be over for 2019. But
Well, see, this same thing happened last year, and I don't know if you were following. I know you weren't following it quite as closely last year as you are this year, but we had essentially the same bill that would move us to constitutional carry, and it wound up doing the same thing, that it just never got enough support to wind up passing, and it just kind of timed out, and we kept getting promised that it was going to come back up, and of course it never did. And so I'm not saying that there's no chance of that, because you never say never, but the fact that they're just kind of letting it die on the vine and sort of, not pocket veto is the wrong term here, but just kind of not really decide on it one way or the other, I think that that's probably a pretty bad sign that it gets through in this session. I could be wrong, but...
Well, and I kind of, we are almost halfway through. Today is, I believe, day 14, possibly, and there's 30 legislative days. So once you have to, it takes, 3 days really to pass a bill, just going as fast as you can. So if they don't bring it back up here in the next, 10 days or so, and I should say 10 legislative days, they only have 2 legislative days a week on Tuesday and Thursday. So 10 days is still like 5 weeks away, but if they don't bring it back up quickly in some other form, it probably will just die until next year.
Right. And one thing that I have been, and I love our law enforcement, I love our police officers, they have an insanely difficult job, and I've always been somebody that spoke out in favor of our law enforcement. But on this one, the sheriffs are just completely wrong on this. And a big indication of that is any time that you are on the same side of a fight when it involves firearms as Moms Demand Action, which are a far left radical group that is funded by Michael Bloomberg, that's a pretty good indication you're not on the right side of the issue. And that's what happened with the Sheriff's Association, that they were actually on the same side of this fight as they were. For different reasons, but still.
And they are the ones, they wear their red shirt. And, I think a lot of them are parents who have had a child or someone they know affected by gun violence in some way. But they were there in force and always are on these committee meetings when there's some big Second Amendment kind of bills going through. And I want to say it's the same name that you just said. Moms, what is it? What did you say?
Moms Demand Action.
Gun violence? Yeah, Moms Demand Action, I believe it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they were there, and I'm sure they were very happy. And, I have compassion for them, but I am all about the bad guys are going to have the gun no matter what. So don't take them from the good guys.
Well, absolutely. And I mean, where I stand on that. In fact, it was really disappointing to me to hear, and based on what you said, that there were some people that were for constitutional carry that did show up to speak out. But I think at the initial hearing of this, the reporting that I saw was that Moms Demand Action showed up and members that were speaking on behalf of the sheriff showed up, but nobody showed up to support the bill or to speak in favor of it. And so that was really disappointing. And one of the arguments that came up, and I'm not going to rehash the whole thing. You can watch Friday's show, go back on YouTube and watch that if you're interested in hearing the whole story. But one of the members of the Moms Demand Action group actually was talking about her mother committing suicide with a firearm, which of course is just horribly tragic, and your heart goes out to her. But everything in her story had nothing to do with this bill. Like, nothing about being able to carry without a permit has anything to do with whether or not her mother would have had access to a firearm or would have committed suicide even if she hadn't had access to a firearm. And so even though, you feel compassion for them and you hate some of the things that these people have gone through, that doesn't mean that their stories have anything to do with the bill that is placed before them. They're just anti-gun advocates in general. And so that's really something that you do tend to run into when discussing this. But I'm just disappointed because and some senators brought this up in the debate as well. It just seems so un-American to me to have to take this idea that the state is going to sell you back your constitutional right for a small fee. I mean, granted, we got it a lot better in Alabama than a lot of other states that are very restrictive with pistol permits and that kind of thing. But still, it's of little consolation to me that I still have to pay the state in order to exercise my own constitutional rights. And there's no other constitutional right that you have to do that.
Right.
Okay.
Right. No pun intended. Right.
So I wanted to talk to you about this because this is also an issue that's near and dear to my heart. And you mentioned it when we were on the phone earlier. I didn't even know about this, and I've not seen a lot of media reporting on it. Apparently there's a trafficking bill.
Yes. So this year, and this is one of our priorities at Eagle Forum, was some human trafficking legislation. So yesterday was, I want to say it was Human Trafficking Day in Alabama. I think it was called something better than that, but it was all 4 of these bills were introduced, or they were actually read in committee yesterday. And let me just tell you real quick a little synopsis. The first one of them would require that health care workers and those that work in massage parlors would have to have training to be able to identify victims of human trafficking. There are so many times that people go to the ER or go to the doctor for whatever reason, and healthcare workers don't know how to identify that someone is being trafficked.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something that would come not as a cost to the state. There were dozens of agencies yesterday that we had a big press conference, and Eagle Forum got to be part of that. But there are agencies, nonprofits out there that are willing and ready to come train healthcare workers across the state for free. Now, that bill did have a public hearing yesterday. Usually when you have a public hearing, they don't vote that day. Normally they'll wait till the next week to have the vote.
Which is actually a policy I favor.
Think about, so they can think about it. Well, one of the bills we're going to talk about in a minute didn't go that way. But, okay, so that one was not voted on. But then another bill was the same kind of thing, but it's going to require all new commercial driver's licensees undergo human trafficking training. And it was Truckers Against Trafficking that helps with this bill. They see people all across the country.
Sure.
They travel around, and they really believe it's important that new truckers understand what to look for if someone's being trafficked. And again, this is not anything that would cost the state. There are agencies or organizations ready to come train these workers, these truckers, and it did pass out of committee yesterday.
Okay, and that's voluntary, right? Like the truckers aren't required to go to it, or how does that work?
No, it does require that anyone getting a new commercial license has to go through this specified training. And the bill.
I'm sorry, I know I'm getting into the weeds here just a little bit, but I'm just curious about it. So would that be a part of getting your CDL license, or how would that work? Would that just be something that they add on to? Okay. All right.
It's just going to become part of the process.
Okay, cool.
And they don't have to pay extra or anything for that, but
Sure.
they have to have that. And this is only for new commercial drivers, not ones who are already out there. However, I believe there will be training available. If any of these truckers out there want that, then they can get that. Okay, then there was another bill that currently what happens is you have like these wanted posters, that you see around in public places. But a lot of times when it comes to prostitution, they show the woman, not the John, not the buyer or the trafficker. And so law enforcement is really trying to change the way we do things, that a lot of these, and I will say a lot of these prostitutes, you can look at them and say, oh, she chose this awful lifestyle and she's so gross, or, whatever your little judgment is. But a large percentage of these, this is not their lifestyle. This is not their choice, I should say. They were taken young, they were groomed, and they have been in this, for a decade or whatever, or longer. So they're trying to turn this around to see them more as victims. And of course, some do choose that lifestyle, but they're trying to really focus on the Johns now and showing the pictures of the Johns So if you have a place where you're supposed to be posting these pictures and you don't, there's a $25 fine. But this law is going to raise those. So the first offense will now be $250 if you don't put the posters up like you're supposed to. And it's $2,500 for the second and other offenses.
Mm-hmm.
And again, so it's just revising the penalties, and it did pass out of committee also. So I think that's all 4 of the bills. Is that right? Was that all 4 of them? Oh,
I was about to say, I think we did 3, didn't we?
Okay, so that's 3. Then there is one that will prohibit publishing photos charged with the act of prostitution while allowing for publishing photos of those charged with soliciting in prostitution. So this is where we want to post the Johns more than the victims, more than the prostitutes. And the other one was the fees for if you don't post it.
Okay, so they're different bills, but they do go hand in hand.
They do, and apparently there are already laws out there. So this law about the publishing the pictures of the Johns, this is just clarifying some existing law and making some changes to it. But I guess we already have that. But they're trying. But the goal is to get the Johns pictures out there, and hopefully, because their picture's going to be out there, they're going to stop doing what they're doing, or at least. And one thing.
Hopefully. And one thing that you talked about that I really do think is a big issue, and it's not really something that the law can do, or at least not do by itself, that it's more of a social stigma. There are a lot of people that are involved in this line of work, the women, that have been trafficked sometimes across the border illegally. Sometimes we're just in a family situation to where the parents either didn't care for them or wanted to make money off them and sold them into sex slavery. And so even though there are some women that sort of opt in for this, there's also a very large plurality of those involved in this that aren't. And so I do hope that we can maybe put the emphasis on that a little bit more so that people will be aware of that. I've done a little bit of work with our Underground Railroad, and they deal with stuff like this specifically with children primarily. And some of the stories that you hear, I mean, it'll just break your heart. And it's very clear that they didn't have an option when it came to this. They were under threat of their life or threat of somebody that they loved and cared about. A lot of times they'll get siblings. And the way that they control them is they'll threaten to hurt the sibling if they don't do what they ask them to.
Yeah. Okay. So let me just tag on to what you're saying, because I thought these numbers were just amazing. I-20 that goes from Birmingham to Atlanta is like the superhighway of human trafficking.
Mm-hmm.
And 40% of all trafficking that happens in the country happens in the Southeast. So we have a huge, our area is really big for human trafficking. And what they're really finding is it's like happening in neighborhoods. It's happening right in front of our eyes, and we don't even know it. So it made me want to go to the training to see, okay, what should I be looking for? Because they could be at a restaurant with you and you have no idea.
Well, I mean, these people have made it an art form for hiding in plain sight, and so they intentionally make it hard for you to spot them. And so that's part of the reason that I do think that these are some good policies that might help us counter that. Yeah.
One of the other things I thought was just fascinating, in the Birmingham metro area alone, they believe estimating $110 million a year is made in human trafficking just in Birmingham, not the entire state. I mean, it is billions and billions of dollar industry, and I'm really glad. This was a bill. All these 4 bills were brought about by a Democrat, Representative Coleman, and Carrie Collins, the representative from the Decatur area. She's also on an education chair, but she's the Republican.
Right.
This is one of those issues that's bipartisan, and it's really great to see everybody coming together, and all the agencies that were there. The AG's office is in favor of all of these bills, and so it was really great. Good things happening in that direction.
Absolutely. And that's one issue that I think we can all unite on and agree that, especially here in the Southeast where it is such a problem, it's something that we can unite on. And one thing that I tell people, and you just see their eyes get huge when I share the statistic with them, that right now there are more sex slaves in the world than there were in the entire 400 years of the Western slave trade. And they can't believe that, but it's true. And it happens right here in America. There is still slavery going on in the United States. And so I really do think that it's great. And I appreciate you tagging that on to the end of this discussion, that this is something where Republicans, Democrats, the labels don't matter. Everybody's able to come together and try to work on some solutions for that. It's great to hear that.
Yeah, it's good stuff. Good stuff.
All right. So is there anything else? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, we'll save campus free speech for next week because we can go into detail about that. But I just wanted to let you guys know that the marijuana bill, this is medical marijuana, the Senate bill, we had a public hearing. Well, okay, we didn't have a public hearing. First of all, the committee meeting was on Wednesday. It was not supposed to be a public hearing. Mm-hmm. Well, we all get to the State House and find out it's a public hearing. So none of us are prepared to say anything. You know, we didn't have everything. I always like to have things written out and kind of have an idea of what I'm going to say.
Sure.
But I felt like, oh my goodness, I have to say something, even if I just stand up there and babble about it as best I can. So what happened was they start this hearing. And like I said, they have a public hearing. They usually don't vote that day. Mm-hmm. So we're going through the hearing. We had somebody say why they liked it, why they didn't like, then somebody got up and said why they did like it, why they did. Anyway, we went back and forth. So I think there were two that said why they liked it and one said why they didn't like it. Or maybe it was. Anyway, all of a sudden, one of the committee members says, just right in the middle of this doctor talking about how wonderful this is, he says, I vote for a favorable report. And somebody quickly said, I second. And the chair of the committee basically said, okay, we're done. So I hadn't got up to speak yet. We still had, people written down that we're going to have 3 minutes to speak. And so one of the guys, Joe Godfrey, who's in charge of ALCAP, who's really big on fighting this and fighting the lottery, he just spoke out kind of out of turn and said, well, wait, we still have people to speak. And that's when they realized they had more that had spoken for it than against it. And they said, okay, we'll let one more person come speak against it. So they called up some person and they came and it was a Alabama Pediatric Medical Association or something like that came up and said why, this CBD oil works for these children. It's working great. We don't need to open it up to this and blah, blah, blah. And then she sat down and basically that was the end of that. So it will be going to the Senate floor. And again, I believe this is a Trojan horse for recreational marijuana because almost every state that started out this way now has full-blown recreational marijuana. But I have a lot of studies in front of me that show that, especially if you use this for pain management, it is actually worse than opioids. Your pain, the studies that they've done show that your pain is actually worse. So there are.
Well, now hold on. I want you to clarify that real quickly. When you say your pain is worse, do you mean that it does not manage your pain as well, or are you saying that it actually worsens your pain?
More. So I have a footnote here too. Cannabis was associated with more subsequent pain, less self-efficacy for managing pain, and no reduction in prescribed opioid use. So they're trying to use it to help get people off.
Okay.
Oh, there was something else I was going to say about that medical issue.
Sorry, I probably messed you up when I interrupted. But
no. Oh, yeah. Here it is. This bill, it's a kind of a long bill. It's about 41 pages long, and it lists the 30 reasons for ailments that you can have that you can use medical marijuana for. And they're simple. I mean, some of them, of course, are like cancer-related, nausea, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's something I can sympathize with. So
yes. Addiction, Alzheimer's, anxiety, autism, depression, IBS.
Sure.
Sleep disorders. There's a long condition, but it does specify that you have to. It has to be, the prescription has to be written by a doctor. You have to have a second opinion, which I'm glad that's in there. You have to be certified really to be able to prescribe this kind of drug, and you have to buy it from a special pharmacy, all the regular stuff that all the other states did. They're finding so many good things coming out with CBD. We're all about that. Works great. But studies are showing that those who use it medically drive high. They did a Michigan study and found that 40% of those admitted to driving high within like an hour of taking their medicine, they were driving. 20% were very high when they drove. Colorado, it's full-blown recreation in Colorado now.
Right.
But
I
they're
would
having
be
a lot of more accidents and things like that.
I would be really interested to see if there's a study that sort of compares it to opioids or other pain management medication, because I don't doubt at all that there are people that drive under the influence of marijuana when they take it for medical purposes. But the question is it more, less, or about the same as people that also drive under the influence of other pain medications? And so, I would be fascinated to see a comparison on that. That's something that I probably need to do a little bit more study on since it's coming up in the state.
I would think too that if you polled opioid users for pain management, I'm sure there are a lot of them out there driving when they probably shouldn't be.
Now, I'll go ahead and say now, I didn't, and I didn't have to take some when I was sick, but I never did drive under the influence of them. So, and it's an inconvenience, but it's the right thing to do.
Yes.
All right, so
well, thank you so much for having me. Oh,
yeah, just one little tease before we take off. We're going to tackle the Campus Free Speech Bill, House Bill 498 next week. And I just wanted to ask, what is its status right now? Like, are we expecting there to be a vote on this sometime in the next week before we talk to you again, or what?
Okay, it just got dropped, which means the sponsor just laid it in the basket on the speaker's desk, and they pulled it out of the basket and assigned it to a committee. And you know what? I don't even know what committee it's been assigned to. So there's not even a hearing for it yet. It's possible there could be one on Wednesday. So if there is, we can talk about it on Thursday. But right now, it's just been introduced. We released a press release on it that you received. Just as a teaser, there are schools in Alabama, these are colleges in Alabama, who are violating First Amendment rights that have free speech zones. And this is something that we just want to make sure that students and faculty's rights are protected, and they can speak they can say what they want to say in the public areas of campus, and they don't have to go to the little circle around the building, in the back, under the trees, to be able to say something controversial.
Right. So that's just going to be the tease that we give out there. So be sure to join us back next week with Becky Gerritson, and we'll give you a report, tell you more about what this problem is, how this bill plans to solve it, and hopefully we'll also have a report on whether or not this thing actually winds up passing the House, or at least has a good chance of passing the House. Thanks so much for being with us, Becky. As always, very enlightening to talk to you.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm glad there was so much to talk about this time.
Boy,
and I think next week's going to be really busy too. So
I was about to say we went like 35 minutes, so this is like a record for you being on the show.
I know.
All right.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Becky. You have a good week.
You too.
That's Becky Gerritson of Eagle Forum, Alabama. As always, great to see her. Great to have her on the program. And I tell you what, we're going to go ahead and we'll take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll talk about some more local news. We have some local news in the Senate race and somebody who wants to unseat Senator Doug Jones of the state of Alabama. More on that in a second.
And now for a reading from the Social Justice Warrior Bible with Pastor Gregory Post.
Welcome in. I'm Gregory Post, head pastor at the Eternal Living Word Trans-Denominational Community Church and Coffee House in Novato, California. Now it's time for a reading from the SJW Bible. Today's reading will come from Leviticus chapter 10, verses 1 through 10. Now Nadab and Abihu, the sons of Aaron, took their respective fire pans, and after putting the fire in them, placed incense on it and offered strange fire before the Lord, which he had not commanded them. And the fire came out of the presence of the Lord, which created a wicked cool light show for them to see, and totally got everyone feeling the Spirit's presence. Then Moses said to Aaron, "It is what the Lord spoke, saying, even though I didn't command you to use this strange fire, I totally understand your need to express yourselves in worship and keep yourselves entertained." So Aaron therefore danced and yelled with joy, knowing that his sons were having a good time at worship. Moses called out to Mishael and Ezaphan, and the son of Aaron's uncle Uzziel, and said to them, "Come forward, carry your relatives away in front of the sanctuary outside of the camp, for they have fainted from being overwhelmed by the power of God's coolness." So they came forward and carried them still in their tunics outside the camp, as Moses had said. Then Moses said to Aaron and his sons Eleazar and Ithamar, "Do not uncover your heads, nor tear your clothes, because God wants us to always be happy, and as long as we're happy, He's happy. Therefore, if worship doesn't give you an overwhelming sense of euphoria, you need to find another congregation, preferably one with a more dynamic pastor and band." So they did according to the word of Moses. And the Lord spoke to Aaron, saying, "Do not drink wine or strong drink, neither you nor your sons with you, when you come into the sanctuary, so that you will be able to drink more once you arrive. It is a perpetual statute throughout your generations. And so as to make a distinction between the holy and the profane, between the unclean and the clean, because when worship stops being fun or feels judgy, then it becomes profane and unclean." Wow, so inspiring. This has been a reading from the SJW Bible. And remember, the only truth that matters is your truth.
Welcome back, everybody. We appreciate you staying with us through the break, and we have a surprise for you, which we were not planning on, but both Becky and I forgot to mention something really important that is coming up here in just a second. So welcome back to the program yet again, Becky Gerritson. It feels like I just talked to you.
Yeah, long time no hear. Okay, so while I was waiting for your break to go through, I have another piece of news that I need to tell you. So I have two things to tell you. Number one, I just got the special order calendar coming up for Tuesday's legislative day. The abortion bill will be on the House floor on Tuesday. So that's just a heads up, and you can listen online. So if you're at work or, at home, you can actually watch what's happening on the House floor, and you can listen to the debate. So that's just a heads up for Tuesday. And
now where would the link be real quick for that if you do want to watch it, you want to listen in?
Okay, that's really difficult for me to tell you, and I hate to say it. I'm going to send you the link, okay? And then with instructions on how to get there. They make it really, really difficult, and I do it all the time, so I know how to do it. But if you're just a new person trying to figure it out, you need a cheat sheet. So I'll send you a cheat sheet on how to do that, okay?
Gotcha. I will.
And you can
look
share
into
it with
that
on your Facebook page or Twitter or whatever.
Good, and
okay.
I'll share that with the audience. Excellent.
Great. Okay, now I want to invite everyone. Eagle Forum of Alabama is going to have a Legislature 101 seminar this coming Tuesday on the 30th from 12 o'clock to 2 o'clock. And this is where you're going to come and you're going to get to tour the State House. You can meet your legislator, but our seminar will talk about how a bill becomes a law, how to lobby your legislator, how to use that crazy online website, and we will be handing out a cheat sheet to make it much easier for you. You'll get to meet some great Eagle Forum volunteers, learn about our Teen Eagle program, and so that's from 12 to 2. And if you want to go, Caleb, feel free to give out my phone number if anyone calls you for it. I'm happy for you to share that.
Will do.
But they can go to alabamaeagle.org to register. And on our homepage, kind of on the bottom right, you'll see a little box that says Events. Click on Events, click on Legislature 101, and you'll see a little RSVP box where you'll put in how many people you want to come, and you'll fill out your name and your email address, and it's as easy as that. So 12 o'clock on Tuesday.
If people go to this event and learn too much about it, they may not listen to me anymore. They won't need me.
No.
I'm kidding.
You, and then they can take my place and say, hey, I was down there with Becky, and here's what happened. So
No, I'm
I
just
think it's
playing.
gonna be
Believe me,
I know.
I am 100% in favor of more people in this state being informed on the issues and knowing really how to navigate uh, sort of going through an issue and going through a bill and the advantages and disadvantages of that. That is something that I am 100% in favor of. So,
It's really kind of intimidating if you've not been to the state house. It can, and then when you do go,
mhm.
it is kind of scary. So we want to take the fear out of it to help people realize that this is your house, and you need to be here, and we'll show you how to do it, and be able to have confidence to weigh in on issues, and it really makes a difference.
Sounds like a great program, and that's alabamaeagle.com?
.org.
.org.
alabamaeagle.org. Events tab kind of on the bottom right.
All right, excellent.
Thank you so much for taking my call again.
Oh, no problem. Thank you, Becky.
Bye-bye.
All right, bye. All right, so once again, Becky Gerritson of Eagle Forum, Alabama. Always a pleasure to have her on the program, even though this time it was kind of a surprise that that was just on both of our parts. We forgot that we were supposed to talk about that. But thank you so much, Becky, for all that you do for the state of Alabama and keeping us all informed. And now Eagle Forum, Alabama, putting on a program to help you keep yourself informed. And so anything that educates and teaches some basic civics to the citizens, this sounds like it's going to be a great event. Highly encourage you to come. I might even stop by. I'm not sure exactly what my schedule is going to look like that day, but I may even stop by for this thing and just take a look at it and see what it's all about. So I encourage you to do that. alabamaeagle.org. So check that out, Eagle Forum, Alabama, and Becky Gerritson. Now, I did want us to sort of shift gears here, and there is another big local story that I think is important to bring up. And this is one of those things where I'm caught in a strange place because it's one of those stories where I have to kind of put some of my preconceived notions aside. And I do have those, obviously. I'm an opinion guy. I'm not a journalist. And so I have to give my thoughts on things. And that's the reason that you watch this show, is because you're interested in my commentary on the news of the day. Well, this is one that was hard for me to do just because I like the guy so much. And what I'm talking about is that Tommy Tubberville, the former football coach, the head football coach for the Auburn Tigers, and somebody that I really admired. In fact, I was really upset when they fired him. I always have been a big Tubberville fan. I thought that he kind of got a raw deal and they should have given him a little more time to get the program back where he wanted it to. I know that there's some Auburn fans that disagreed with me on that, but I've always been a huge Tubberville fan. The man ran a phenomenal program. And especially when you're considering that the goal, at least the intended goal, of any athletics program at a institution of learning that's not just a professional league like the NFL or the Major League Baseball or minor league system within Major League Baseball, when you're not talking about people that are specifically playing for money, that the intended goal of a college football program or any college athletic program ought to be to develop young men and develop young women. So regardless of what the sport is, regardless of the implications there, you are teaching student athletes and you're helping them engage in a process which is supposed to enrich their learning experience and also enrich them as individuals. And that's something that Tubberville excelled at. I mean, the guy was really good at the chaplain program, something that was sort of the envy of the college football world. A lot of people don't know that. That didn't exactly get a lot of headlines, but his chaplain program was top notch. And there were other programs that specifically modeled their chaplain programs after Auburn University because of that. It had a phenomenal chaplain program. The athletes had very high test scores under Tubberville. He made sure that that was a part of the experience of being an Auburn Tiger when he was the head football coach. And I think that he's a great coach from the standpoint of, can you remember any other coach that went on a 6-win streak against Alabama? No, you can't, because it never happened. So the guy knows football, and he was good at developing young people, which in my mind is the primary goal, not the only goal. We like to win, and obviously that's a big part of it, but that is the primary goal of any athletic program that is associated with a institution of higher learning. And so I have a great deal of admiration for Tommy Tubberville. I really, really like the guy. And of course, I'm an Auburn Tiger, and that doesn't hurt. And by the way, I actually took a poll on this as to whether or not Alabama fans would actually vote for Tommy Tubberville. And there were a few people that said, just because he's associated with Auburn, that I wouldn't vote for him. The vast majority of them, though, said, yeah, I'm an Alabama fan, but I don't really care. As long as I like the guy's politics, I'll vote for him. So I don't think that's going to be a huge hindrance. There's going to be some people that aren't going to vote for him just because he is associated with Auburn. But I think that is a very small minority, and I don't know that it's going to make a huge difference in the Republican primary, at least not a noticeable difference. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but I don't think so. And granted, this was a completely unscientific poll, so I'm not claiming that it's something that I know for sure, but I'm saying just based on what I've seen and heard, I don't think that it's going to be a major contributing factor. I will, however, say this, though. Tommy Tubberville has been making the media rounds since his announcement that he is going to be running for Senate against his primary opponents, and then hopefully for him one day against Doug Jones, trying to get Doug Jones's Senate seat. And I have been thoroughly underwhelmed and unimpressed with his performance on the national stage and talking to local journalists as well. And sort of to illustrate this, here's a clip of Tommy Tubberville doing an interview over the weekend with Fox and Friends, and they ask him some very basic questions. The interview only lasts 3 minutes. So here's a clip from that interview.
So what are some of the key issues for you and how you would want to impact Washington?
Well, as you said, I'm not a politician, especially a career politician, and I don't want to be. I want to be somebody that just helps out the people of this country. This is a great country. I've had a chance to travel all over the world, being a football coach, going to see our troops, traveling all over the country, been in homes, rich homes, poor homes, middle-class homes, out just meeting the people as a football coach. But now I want to do it as somebody that's going to help, that tries to give back. And I think it couldn't be I could think 10 or 12 people that's in the coaching business right now would make great congressmen or senators in Washington, D.C.
When you're looking at that clip, I think the biggest problem is they ask him specifically for a policy proposal. What would be a policy proposal that you would put in place? What kind of things would you as a senator want to see being passed in the Senate? And he basically talks about how there are football coaches that would be good senators, which has nothing to do with what is being discussed here. And again, I really like Tommy Tubberville as a person. I respect him as a man and as a brother in Christ. I think that he's about as good a guy as you'll ever meet. And I would love to meet him someday. He's somebody that I really admire and really respect. But if that's his answer to a policy proposal, if that's what is supposedly his game plan, as it were, pun intended, for being a senator, I'm sorry, you're going to have to do a lot better than that. Not just a little bit better, a lot better. Now, I'm not saying that you have to, especially in a national interview, because I realize that you can't get too technical because it'll go over the audience's head. But you have that opportunity to talk about any number of issues facing our country, the national debt, illegal immigration, some of the things that we were just talking about that are facing the state of Alabama with Becky Gerritson. You could talk about sex trafficking. You could talk about, just any number of things. You could talk about, even if you want to go a little bit off the beaten path, you could even talk about marijuana, prison reform. There's a list longer than my arm of things that you can discuss. And essentially all you're talking about is that you've been a politician, or that you think that other football coaches would be good politicians, and that you need some leadership. That's essentially what his answer boiled down to. And I'm just sitting there scratching my head like, that's not a plan. That's not a policy proposal. That's just sort of a bunch of vague platitudes. And so it was an answer that was very underwhelming, and he kind of continued that trend in the very next question, where he was asked about his strategy, his political strategy to winning. So now we're moving out of the policy realm and what he would like to actually do if he became a senator, into, okay, how do you plan to beat your Republican opponents and then eventually Doug Jones? And here was his answer.
Well, Tommy, just real briefly, I know you don't want to give away everything, but as coaches do, going into the big game, they have a strategy. What's your strategy to win?
Well, first of all, I want to support President Trump, support him from day one. I'm the only candidate in this race that supported him in his last election. I believe in him. He has a great work ethic. The guy's a winner. And the things that he's done, we need people to stand behind him in the Senate, in Congress, to help him get his agenda through. That's the main thing. But I want to help this state in Alabama. Alabama's going to grow. It's going to really grow. We've got a Democratic senator in there right now that is not doing the things that we need to do to help the state of Alabama.
So, again, Tommy Tubberville asked a very specific question. What's your strategy for winning? And essentially, the only answer that he has is, well, I really like President Trump. Which, again, not necessarily a strategy. Now, I think that this is a little bit closer to an answer, and my explanation for that would, of course, be that this has had mixed results, but it has worked for certain people. For example, Ron DeSantis in Florida. He basically ran as mini Trump. I mean, that was essentially his strategy. He even had that awful campaign ad where he basically talks about Trump almost as people really should be talking about God. If they were really faithful to him, that he was teaching his kids about Trump, reading children's books to them about Trump, and just saying Trump, 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 not talking about any policy proposals or anything like that, just talking about how much he likes Donald Trump. And in this state, that may not be a terrible strategy. This is the state that went harder for Donald Trump than any other state, and where he enjoys a higher popularity rating than any other state in the country. And we kind of go back and forth some with West Virginia, but suffice it to say, we are there. You could make a very good case for Alabama being the most pro-Trump state in the United States. So maybe that strategy works out. Maybe it's not the worst strategy, and he was quick to point out, and he's not incorrect in this, that he's the only candidate running that supported Trump from day one. Well, I think that that's probably true, because right now the only person that is running against him is Bradley Byrne, and I don't remember, because frankly I don't care. I don't remember what Bradley Byrne's stance is on Trump, was on Trump during the primaries or early on. I don't really remember. Frankly, I don't care. I care about how he votes, and I care about how he conducts himself as a member of the House. I don't care how much he supports the president. Now, maybe in this state, people that don't like to think, people that don't want to think and want to let other people do their thinking, that may be a strategy that's effective. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people like that in the state. I don't know if it's quite enough to win a Republican primary, but it's a significant number. And that's the problem that I have with this strategy overall, is that based on what I was hearing right there, that is the sign of someone that is not thinking. Somebody that's saying, well, my philosophy and my strategy is basically, I'm just going to agree with whatever that guy says. And there's a lot of people that do this politically. Believe it or not, even though they're few and far between, there are people that probably have done similar things with me. That, okay, well, Caleb supports that policy, so I'm just going to support it too. I've never asked for anybody to do that. I'll present my side of it. I'll give you some compelling arguments. But I don't ever want anybody to just say, you know what, Caleb, he's pretty close to me politically, so whatever he says, I'm just going to go with that. There are people that do this with Donald Trump. They're the ones that I talk about, the Trumpettes that believe that Donald Trump can do no wrong. Granted, I really like a lot of the things that Donald Trump has done. I do. But I don't like them because Trump likes them, because there's some things that Trump does that I don't like. I like them because I think the policies themselves are good ideas. I mean, heck, even though it's incredibly rare, there are even times where Bernie supports a policy that I like. It almost never happens, but specifically I can think of he was trying to bring down trade barriers about medication between the U.S. and Canada, which I was 100% fine with. The protectionist policies, that was just hurting people on both sides of the border. And so it didn't make any sense to me that those laws were in place. And so him wanting to get rid of those restrictions, I was 100% in favor for. Not because I think Bernie's a good candidate, not because I think Bernie is right on about 99% of things, just because I thought he happened to be right on that one policy issue. And so what we've got to do is we've got to move away from this unfortunate tendency that we have now in this country to just take one person that we happen to ally with most of the time politically and just let them do all of our thinking for us. It's a lazy intellectual way to have an opinion, but not have to actually do any thinking and any analysis to really reach that opinion on your own. And unfortunately, it seems as though, and again, even though I'm someone that really likes Tubberville as a person, it seems as though, at least based on that answer, what Tubberville is saying is that's what he's going to do with Donald Trump, that whatever Donald Trump says, that's what I'm going to go along with. I don't want that. We have separate branches of government for a reason. And Congress is supposed to be a check on the president, even if they happen to share his party. In the same way that I wish that there had been some Democrats that stood up during the Obama administration and say, yeah, I like President Obama, but I'm not going along with that. That's insane. I also want Republicans. I also want people, because this is an indication that they're at least thinking for themselves, that stand up and say, yeah, I'm on board with a lot of Trump's agenda, but I can't go along with him on this one. And unfortunately, and maybe this is a winning strategy, I don't know. Like I said, there's a lot of people that kind of think the same way that Tubberville seems to, that we'll just go with whatever Trump says, and that'll be the philosophy. Whatever position he takes on an issue, I'm just going to go along with that. That's an indication of somebody who doesn't want to think for themselves. And we do not need a senator that's a yes man, that is essentially a mini Trump, that just does whatever Trump says. That's not a good policy. That's not a good way to, because if that happens, I mean, think about it. If everybody in the House and Senate thought that way, first of all, that's a really bad precedent, because what happens when there's a president that you don't like in the White House? There would be no point of having a Congress in the first place. The reason that we have separate branches of government is because they're supposed to keep a check on someone. Now, I also don't think that they should oppose a policy that the other guy does just out of spite. In other words, okay, this is a guy that I typically don't agree with politically, so I'm just going to disagree with everything he does because that's the way that I'm going. That's not a good idea either. I'm saying we have to take things on a case-by-case basis and look at them and think analytically about them, about their results, and whether they would actually be A, constitutional, that's the first thing, and B, whether or not they would actually be a good idea. And if he had had an answer sort of more along those lines, because I get that you can't lay out all of your policy proposals in a 3-minute interview. I understand that. But you got to give me more than that. And so, Tubberville, I'm not saying this as an enemy. I'm not saying this as somebody who doesn't like you or wants to see you fail or any of that. I'm saying this as constructive criticism and trying to be as nice about it as humanly possible. If you're going to make a serious run for the Senate to represent the state of Alabama in the Senate of the United States of America, you have got to come up with better answers than that. You're a smart guy. You're a good guy. I think that you can do better. And so it's time to... That was a busted play, to put it into football terms. We got to do something to fix that play. Now, to his credit, he gave an interview to CBS. He did give an interview to CBS over in Columbus, Georgia, and granted, his answers were far, far better in that interview than here. And maybe that was because it was long form and he did a little better. So real quickly, I'm going to go over just a couple of the answers that he gave there. So just as an overall impression of it, he did mostly talk about what he was against and not what he was for. Granted, still an improvement, because honestly, if you're going to go to Washington and just vote against the things that he said he's against, which would be, for example, open borders was one of the things that he did talk about, that is at least a position on a policy. And at least that means that you would be better than Doug Jones in that respect, which, I mean, at this point, I'd vote for almost anybody against Doug Jones. But nonetheless, at least that is a legitimate policy proposal. That is at least taking a stance on an issue. So even though I'd rather see some more things that you're for, as opposed to just having you talk about all the things that Doug Jones is doing wrong and all the things that you're against, at least that is a improvement over this Fox and Friends interview. Another thing too, he did talk about the need for Christian morals. This is a really good starting point. Now, is it a policy proposal? Is it something that should necessarily be, does that qualify you to be a senator? No. Doesn't mean that you would be a good senator, but it's a good starting point. It's a lot better to have that good foundation of eternal moral principles that do not change and based on God's word than to start out from somewhere else, because that's going to allow you to at least have the potential to get to more of the right answers. And I believe in what John Quincy Adams said when he said that it is the duty of the American people to desire to prefer Christians to all others for their leadership, because we are a nation that has a constitution that is built, as he said, for only a moral and religious people, and that it is wholly inadequate for the governance of any other. And so, good foundation, but it alone is not enough in my mind to make you a good senator. And let me see if I can give an analogy here to help you out with this. So, I think that a lot of people would consider Ben Shapiro a good man, a moral man, and also a smart man. I mean, the guy's very intelligent, has a very high IQ. I still wouldn't want him working on my car. Not because I think he's dumb, not because I think he's a bad person, but because he's not a mechanic. And so this is kind of the same position that right now I'm kind of seeing myself in with Tommy Tubberville. I like him, think he's a good guy. If, you know, somebody that I would want to have as a friend or a neighbor or something like that. But right now, he has done virtually nothing to show me that he is prepared for the task of being a representative of the state of Alabama in the U.S. Senate. And so I find myself kind of opposing him because of that. Not because I have anything against him personally, but not having anything against him personally still doesn't mean that I think that he should be a senator. And so while I appreciate him talking about Christian values, and I agree with him that there is a lack of that in the Senate right now, that by itself is not enough to get you to the top of my list on people I want to be senators from the state of Alabama. And the thing is, being a good person and being a smart person, well, I could also say that about Mo Brooks and Bradley Byrne and Jim Ziegler. I could say that about any of those men. And they also have experience in government that I think would make them far better senators than Tommy Tubberville, at least right now. And so that's kind of where I stand. And if he's going to have that foundation of moral principles, that's good. But he also needs to adequately articulate how we're going to apply those things. That's really what I want to hear him do. Because there are a lot of people that at least claim to be Christians, and I think Tommy Tubberville is the real deal. I'm not saying that he isn't. But I'm saying there are a lot of people that claim to be followers of Christ and to know the Bible, and then say crazy things like Nancy Pelosi saying that her being a Catholic is the reason that she supports abortion, or having a guy like Pete Buttigieg saying that, you know, me being gay is the reason that I'm a better person, and using that sort of as a basis for him supporting the LGBT community in a political way. And so the proper application of those principles is also incredibly important. And right now, Tommy Tubberville has not done anything to display why he would be able to do that. And I hope that he does. He's got plenty of time to change my mind on this. He's got, 10, 11 months before the primaries. So the guy has all the time in the world to convince me that he actually can do these things and to be more specific on it. And he has a standing invitation. Anytime he wants to be on this show via phone or in studio, Coach Tubberville, you have an open invitation to come and tell me why you want to be a senator and sort of correct me on this. And I would welcome that opportunity. But right now, based on what I have right in front of me that I've seen out of him so far, he's done nothing to show that he is knowledgeable enough about the issues facing this country and have correct application of those moral principles to come up with solutions. He has not done that adequately to show me that he would be a good senator. It looks like we have a caller on line 1, so we'll go ahead and go to the phones. Good afternoon. What's your name?
Hey, good afternoon. Listen, there's no way that he's as qualified as Jim Ziegler is.
How did I know that you were going to say that?
Listen, and I still work with him in a lot of ways. I think he's a tough-minded individual. I think he's integrity.
Okay, your phone's
have that.
Your phone's kind of breaking up there a second. Could you kind of repeat that?
Yeah, I just said, Tubberville, I think is a man of integrity.
Mm-hmm.
I do like him. As far as what being a football coach makes you the right kind of person to be a senator, I don't know, but he has the one thing that so many other people do not have, and that's name recognition.
He does have a lot of name recognition.
He has that, and you know, you got to say this about it. How much of a chance does he have, given the fact that he was a coach at Auburn?
Well, now, you and I both know this. Name recognition is incredibly important in the state of Alabama. In fact, most of the time, the candidate with better name recognition wins, regardless of their policy positions. There are a handful of rare exceptions, but by and large, if you got the most name recognition, you win the contest outright. Usually that's how it happens.
Best Alabama coach right now that's still coaching, if he were to come out and do it, he would win it in the landslide.
Oh, there's no doubt. He could be the governor if he wanted to.
Or whichever one he wanted.
Sure.
And it wouldn't make any difference about which party he went to.
Probably not, actually.
And he would run as a Democrat.
I would imagine so. He was a Hillary supporter, so.
Yes, he was. As far as Coach Tubberville is concerned, seriously, if he has that, I wonder who his advisors are. That would be interesting to see inside who has given him the advice that he needs to do this and do that. Because you always have people that reach out to you in these instances, and because in many times they don't come up with it on their own.
Most of the time, that's true.
Somebody encourages them to do that and talks to them about it. Vince Dooley was urged to run for senator. You may not know who Vince Dooley is, but he's an ex-football coach at Georgia and was a quarterback at Auburn and was Georgia's coach for a very long time, the longest one in history. And he flirted with running in Georgia, but ultimately backed out on it. And, of course, and he had the kind of name recognition to win it. And over in that state, and he was with the state university. That kind of thing is vital. They worry about governing later. They really do.
Well, and like I said before you came on, I can't say with absolute certainty because of his name recognition and also because of how incredibly popular the president is in the state that this is not a winning strategy. I mean, you have almost universal name recognition, at least within the state of Alabama, by people that are old enough to vote. And you also have just saying, I really like Trump, and most of the people in Alabama also really like Trump. Maybe he doesn't actually have to have any policy positions to win. And I'm not saying that is a good thing. I think that would be a bad thing. But the point is, as far as just in sheer political terms, not looking at whether or not he'd be a good senator or not, he may have the best, at least right now, he may have the best shot at winning.
Well, he may do it, but here's what's going to happen. If I'm running against him, one picture that would be all over the place would be him standing up there with 6 fingers up in the air.
Yeah. Granted, that would not be good for his campaign with some Alabama fans. I don't think most of them would hold it against him, but like I said before, at least some of them will.
Don't ever underestimate the power of football in this state. I disagree with that. I mean, I think there's a huge number of people that as soon as they see that picture and are reminded of it, they'll say, I'm not voting for that son of a gun. I mean, I may be wrong, but I don't think I am. I think there's a high percentage.
See, I don't think there's a high percentage, but the thing is, especially when you're talking about a primary, and it looks like just on the onset, this primary field is going to be pretty crowded. If you've got a crowded primary field, you don't need that much.
Well, that's true.
3 or 4% can sink you. Remember how close it was between Roy Moore and Luther Strange?
Yeah.
So, if what you're talking about is, I don't think that there's a majority of Alabama fans that would do that, but you only need a few percentage points of people that won't vote for you because you are a former Auburn coach And that might sink your campaign.
Well, I'll say this. I hope that no matter what happens, who the nominee is on the Republican side, there's not a one of them that I don't think is light years ahead of. And I'll say this. You mentioned the criteria with regard to Tubberville, some of the things that you talked about. Heck, I meet those characteristics myself. And I don't have any business being a senator.
Yeah.
But, I mean, let's think about it. It's not rocket surgery, as we say, because you're actually required to do pretty much one thing, and that's vote on things and propose legislation.
Or you could do what President Obama did when he was a senator and just vote present for everything.
Yeah, he pretty much didn't do anything. He was running for president.
I mean, technically he voted, but he just said, oh, I'm here.
Yeah.
So that's also possible. But thank you so much for your call. I appreciate it.
Okay.
But yeah, that's the thing about Senator, potential Senator Tommy Tubberville. I just don't know that he would be all that knowledgeable about policy. And one of the things that he said in the CBS interview is, I want to be a loud voice for Alabama. Okay, that's good, but being loud doesn't mean you're right. And that's the thing. I do want a dynamic senator. I want somebody like Jeff Sessions, who was very outspoken and spoke a lot about, especially the border. That was kind of his pet project. That was the thing that he was known for. I want somebody from the state of Alabama that is very outspoken like Mo Brooks. That's not a unreasonable thing to talk about, and it's not something that we should shy away from. I'm in agreement with Tubberville on that. But again, he's sort of just giving a general idea as opposed to being specific on what he would want to stand for as a senator. There are 3 ideas that he was asked about. Give us 3 ideas, the interviewer did, which I thought was a really good question. 3 ideas that you as a senator would want to put in place to help Alabama. Now, one of his answers was to prepare for the population boom. So what he was talking about is that there are a lot of people, and by the way, this was accurate, there are a lot of people that are moving from the north and moving to red states. And that's partly because of the lower taxes and that kind of thing, which if our legislature has anything to say about it with the bills that they've been passing this session, that's not going to stay that way for very long. But nonetheless, that's what's going on. He says we have to be ready for the population boom. Okay, that's not a solution. You're identifying a problem. You're not talking about the solution. For example, if your doctor walks in and says, okay, we found a really big problem. You've got, appendicitis. You're like, well, what do we do now? It's like, well, I just told you have appendicitis. I mean, it's good that you know that, but does it really help you if you don't have a solution? And again, I'm open to hearing Coach Tupperville's solution, but in this interview, he just talked about the problem, didn't actually talk about what we're going to do to adjust for it. And I'm not saying that it's an illegitimate problem. I think that it's good that he pointed it out, but he still doesn't actually have a solution that he brings up. Another one that he talked about was education. He says that we're spending too much and still coming out 37th in the world, and we're not allocating our resources correctly. On this one, he was a little more specific, and keep in mind, he not only worked at Auburn University and Clemson, he was also a high school teacher at one point as well. So he does have some insight into this issue from the teacher standpoint. And he also talked about some of these college kids are going through universities like Auburn and still can't get jobs. Still no solution. Really good at identifying the problem. Not so great at identifying the solution or coming up with something that's actually workable. Now, on the final one, I have to give him credit. He did actually have a proposal, and it was one that I agreed with. He was talking about our Social Security system being broke and how we haven't done anything to fix it. And one of the things that he brought up is that Canada, well, actually, he didn't cite Canada. This has happened in Canada, but he cited a European country. So he said that they had their Social Security system, which was pretty much the same as the American system, go broke. And what they did is they reorganized it and put it into essentially what is a blind trust. It's not his words. I'm just sort of paraphrasing here. What they did was they kind of put that money into a blind trust and allowed people to pay into the system. And those same people put it into a 401k and invested it essentially in the market so that it could continue to grow. And Canada implemented that. And actually, their Social Security system is far more market-based than the American Social Security system. Now, being the small government federalist that I am, I don't think that we should have any kind of retirement system at the federal level whatsoever. If the states want to do it, that's their business, but it shouldn't be done at the federal level at all. But nonetheless, at least he actually is proposing a solution here. So again, I don't think Tuberville's a dumb guy. I think that he's smart enough, and he's probably smarter even than some of the senators that we have in office right now, but he lacks the proper experience, and right now he's barely even on my radar as a Senate candidate because of the people that he would be presumably running against. And so he needs to really sharpen up and really tighten down the screws and study this stuff and become more knowledgeable in it, because right now he's done nothing to prove to me that he can come in and actually do a good job as senator. And by the way, I know that a lot of people like the idea of somebody that's a political outsider coming in, and Trump was sort of a big testament to that because he's someone that never held political office suddenly becoming the president of the United States. I try not to hold that against people, but I do want to know what they stand for. And you'll remember that in the governor's primary, I endorsed Scott Dawson, somebody that was a political outsider. But the reason that I endorsed him is because he impressed me with his knowledge of the issues and his proposed solutions. Right now, Tuberville hasn't done that. Got plenty of time to change my mind. Coach, you're welcome on the show anytime to try to do that. As of right now, I can't support him. But hey, a lot can change in 10 months, especially in the world of politics. Let's go to the chaplain's report.
In 1775, the Continental Congress created the Chaplain Corps. Under the command of General George Washington, each soldier was required to attend worship service every Sunday. While other armies advanced on their feet, Washington's troops advanced on their knees. It's time for the Chaplain's Report with Caleb Colquitt on tactics.
Chaplain's report today, it does come from the book of Daniel. We're going to continue in our series on Daniel, and we remember that if you've been paying attention and you remember where we left off last time we were talking about this, Nebuchadnezzar had this dream that was translated by Daniel, and it predicted that he was going to be cut off from mankind, that he was essentially going to live like a beast. And that was going to happen for 7 periods of time. And so this actually does happen to Nebuchadnezzar. This prophecy comes true. And for 7 years, he lives apart from mankind. Not only is he not the king, he's not even really living like a human. His hair grows long. It says his fingernails become like claws. And he is living like a beast out in the wild, eating grass and fending for himself. But that's not where the story ends, and that's really where we start out today in the book of Daniel, chapter 4, verses 34 through 37. And so it reads, "But at the end of that period, I, Nebuchadnezzar, raised my eyes towards heaven, and my reason returned to me. And I blessed the Most High, and praised and honored him who lives forever. For his dominion is an everlasting dominion, and his kingdom endures from generation to generation. All the inhabitants of the earth are all of the inhabitants of the earth are accounted as to nothing, but he does according to his will in the host of heaven and among the inhabitants of the earth, and no one can ward off his hand or say to him, 'What have you done?' At that time my reason returned to me, and my majesty and splendor were restored to me for the glory of my kingdom. And my counselors and my nobles began seeking me out. So I was reestablished in my sovereignty, and surpassing greatness was added to me. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise, exalt, and honor the King of heaven, for all his works are true and his ways are just. And he is able to humble those who walk in pride." The change we see in Nebuchadnezzar is sort of symbolic in his physical appearance. But the real change that the writer Daniel focuses on, and that Nebuchadnezzar himself seems to focus on, is spiritual. That he underwent this time, and you'll remember that the reason that God struck him down, the reason that he was separated from mankind and lived like a beast, is because he was out looking at his kingdom and thinking how amazing he was and how he's been able to build all this, and he is the reason that this great kingdom of Babylon has been able to flourish, and it has essentially conquered a lot of the known world. And he was thinking, man, I'm just so incredible that I've been able to do all of this. He didn't recognize that not only was Babylon the beneficiary of God, and God allowed them to grow to that size and stature amongst the other nations, but he also ignores the fact that even if it had been him, even if it had been his intelligence and cleverness and wisdom, and God hadn't helped Babylon out in that way, even if that were true, where did that wisdom and cleverness and knowledge, where did all that come from? It was granted to him by God. And that's the important thing that we need to remember, is that anything that we have, everything that we are, is the product of God. And I really love the way that the Bible phrases this. And I'm accustomed to the old King James. I teach out of a New American Standard, but the poetic nature of the King James sometimes, I think, gives a better description here. You'll remember that in the verse that we just read, it says, "And my reason returned to me." Because like I said when we were studying this earlier, when the transformation took place, without God, we're essentially just animals, living on instinct and doing whatever feels right. With God, we have laws, we have order, we have purpose, and we can live like men, free men, that choose to love God and do what's right according to his commandments. It's the only way to truly be yourself. It's the only way to truly be an individual. And what we're looking at here is the return of that reason. That the light of reason suddenly comes back to Nebuchadnezzar. That because he realizes that all of this is because of God, and the only way to live and to truly live is to live in accordance with God's will. That's the reason that he was able to return to a human state. The reason that he was able to return to a life of reason and order and live like somebody that is crafted in the image of God. And I want you to also notice here that in the King James, it says, "And I returned to myself." You see, the world gives us a fake sense of individuality. It wants us to think that wearing an ironic t-shirt or a nose ring or having a strange tattoo or a crazy haircut, that's somebody that's being a real individual. No, first of all, those people typically wind up all looking alike. That was one thing that I always thought was really funny. And this girl, thankfully, was a friend of mine, and she knew that I wasn't trying to be offensive when I said this. It was a Gothic girl that I went to high school with, and I asked her why she decided to dress in all black and paint her fingernails black and all that stuff. And she said, well, it's just to let other people know that I'm a real individual. And I said, but you look like every other Gothic kid. And that's the thing. The world offers a false sense of individualism. It says, just live by your emotions, live by your impulses, do whatever feels right to you. Well, if you do that and everybody else is doing that, then you're not an individual. That's what most people do. That's what the majority of the people in the world do. You never really become who you were meant to be until you start living in accordance to the way that your Creator made you. Because your Creator made you for a specific purpose. And so you can fall into this trap of living like Nebuchadnezzar did, living like a beast, apart from mankind, just living on instinct, which he did in a very literal way. This is more figurative. But we can do that and get this false sense of individualism, this false sense of individuality. But if we really want to become individuals, if we really want to live in a dynamic way, a way that we were created to do, that we're fulfilling the purpose that we were always intended for, that from the very time that we were created and stitched together in the womb, if we want to live that life, we want to live out our real purpose, The only way to do that is by following God. The only way to find that task that only we have, that place that God has carved out in the world specifically for us, that we can be real individuals, is by following God and submitting to his wisdom. And that's what Nebuchadnezzar learned. Nebuchadnezzar wasn't 100% wrong when he thought about how great he was. He was great. In the dream, he was this great big tree that other people found shelter in and prospered. The thing is, he lost sight of why he was there. The thing is, he lost sight of his purpose. And that's really, in a sense, what pride is, isn't it? It robs us of our perspective and makes us think that we're the reason that we live. We're the reason that we exist. And it's not that way. We tend to think of ourselves as people who are supposed to live for ourselves and just do what we want. But the truth is, Nebuchadnezzar, even when he didn't realize it, as the king before this happened, he was serving a purpose that fit into God's plan. And once this horrific event happened to him that God allowed to happen, and then later on, his reason returned to him, well, you can see his reaction in the scripture. He understood now that the reason that he was able to accomplish much and the reason that he was where he was in life is because God allowed it. Because God wanted him in that position. And because of that, he suddenly had a sense of gratitude. And the way that this passage ends is, he is able to humble those who walk in pride. Nebuchadnezzar got a very hard lesson in that. But he does. Because when we compare ourselves to God, we compare ourselves to his love and his mercy and his power and his majesty. It first instills in us a sense of awe and wonder and humbles us in the sense that we realize how completely far away we are from him in terms of being far less powerful, far less knowledgeable, far less wise, all of those things. But it also, in a sense, brings us very close to him because we realize how much we depend on him, how much we need him, and how grateful we are that he cares about us and wants us to do the right thing and live a life that is dynamic. And that the only way that he can do that is if we choose to follow him. Stay the course, friends.
Tactics is a production of News Radio 1440 and Cumulus Media Montgomery. Any opinions expressed on this program are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of Cumulus Media. The theme song for Tactics is 6 Foot Town by Big and Rich. Graphics by Jessica Dawson. Broadcast studios provided by Cumulus Media Montgomery. Location studios provided by the Dalraida Church of Christ. Copyright 2019.